Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to Where the Road Rises, Law Lessons Legacy, where we light and guide viewers caring for aging parents, ailing spouses, and their stressed out selves. With me, your host, Eileen Carolyn Walsh, and guests. We tackle the legal, financial, and emotional challenges our brave caregivers face. Last month, Glenn Cato shared poignant stories of nursing his father through his last illness and lessons he learned from their deathbed conversations. Glenn mentioned a little blue book he received from his father's hospice nurse that had been a godsend for him and his mother. Well, we tracked it down for you. The book is called Gone From My Sight, The Dying Experience. It is beautifully written by hospice nurse and pioneer Barbara Carnes. Barbara discovered that most people at the bedside of a dying loved one were numb, in shock and directionless, thus began her life's work and end-of-life education. Barbara's little hospice blue book, as it has become known, outlines what loved ones might expect 3 months prior to the death, 2 weeks, then days, hours, and minutes. Here to talk about end-of-life literature and care is friend of our show and owner of Ashling Companion Home and Care, Ashling Dalton Kelly. Welcome, Ashling.
Good morning, Eileen. Thank
to
you.
The show. Why don't we start by reminding the viewers what you do, Ashling, and how you are involved with families at this very delicate time in their lives.
So my company is Ashling Home Care, and as you know, that company was based on the experiences that I went through with my mother, who had dementia and ended up in hospice care, and my father. So the company was founded for that reason, and we supply caregivers to the home or hospital setting when people begin this journey of becoming sick. And we stay with them every day for whatever needs they ask us for under my licensure, and typically that would be hygienic showers, maybe meal preparation, medicine reminders, and just the troops on the ground every day for activities of daily living.
Beautiful. Ashling, and tell us about hospice. What exactly is it, and when and why should a family consider hospice?
So hospice is a very specialized type of care and they're called in when a person has life-limiting diseases. Families should really be calling in hospice about 6 to 8 months when they see things have changed on a constant downslide, and they need to put things in place to help their loved one transition to the other side. With all of the professionals that can help not just the person that's dying, but also the family that's around the bed.
Oh, beautiful, absolutely, and as much help they need too. And do you find that families embrace hospice, or is there a sense of shying away from it?
They don't really, Eileen, and I'll tell you why, because even ourselves, when the word hospice is mentioned, it's not something that's really spoken about a lot. So there's a lack of understanding as to what hospice can actually do for a family. And sadly, when people mention the word hospice, we think automatically of death. So a lot of families unfortunately leave it till it's very late to have their loved one in hospice, truly because of a lack of understanding the beautiful work that hospice can actually provide for them.
Beautiful. And Ashling, who would typically suggest hospice? Is it the medical providers? Do the family members look for it? And maybe they're even afraid to accept, because you're absolutely right. Hospice typically means for us there's no cure, there's no miracle, that we've almost accepted that our loved one is going to die, and I'm sure that's very difficult.
It is. So, I mean, it depends, Eileen. If the sick person is in a hospital, really it should be the care team, the doctors, the care coordinators, the care managers, the nurses. Sadly, sometimes families may bring it forward first, and that's okay as well. But the truth is that if they're watching everything that's going on and they truly have an education of what hospice can do, those measures can be put in place either from the hospital or not. Maybe mom or dad is transitioned home and things start to develop, then the family member can. However, the challenge is that if family members don't really understand what hospice is about, you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
So where do you start?
And hence the need for this wonderful education and what you do and many of the caregivers and resources that we have in the show. In your experience, what do we need to focus on? We've got to this point where the medical attempts to cure are being laid to rest. So is the focus now on medical care, or should it be on the humans?
In my opinion, Eileen, it should be really on the human being, because dying is not a medical event. Certain procedures happen where they will assist if there's any pain, but the truth is that the person is finishing up inside in their body, and they're preparing to pass away due to the debilitating disease that they have. So it's actually a communal event where everybody should be around the bedside that has been involved with that person in any way, shape or form.
Well, let's talk about that specific resource that we introduced, Gone From My Sight by Barbara Kearns, that our previous guest found so helpful. And I know that you have used that resource in your care. So could you tell us a little bit about the resource, and maybe talk us through the stages that Barbara Kearns identifies?
So I have to say kudos to you, because at an event that you and I just did, we started a conversation with a hospice nurse, if you remember, who told us about this little blue book. And I went on to read it, and it was phenomenal. That's all I can say. It was absolutely phenomenal. And I highly recommend that everybody read it, because it tells you everything you need to know, not necessarily from a medical point of view, but from taking you, just as you had suggested, from where it begins to where it ends. So for that purpose, I think everybody should invest in the book, the little 36-page pamphlet, and it really is phenomenal.
Our assistant in my office, Christine, has just gone through the process with her sister-in-law, a long time in hospice, longer than anyone imagined, which they all considered a gift. And she discovered this literature along with us, along with Glenn, and again, amazed at the things. With Christine, it was her sister-in-law was picking at the clothes, at her bedclothes. They associated that as stress. Glenn's father was flailing a little and moving his arms. They thought he was sad, they thought he was angry, they thought he was agitated. Whereas the book explains that is the release of energy. It's no longer related to emotions.
That's correct.
So maybe we'll talk a little bit through those stages that the book outlines, the stages when we're still within a couple of months of death and we still have a responsive patient.
So typically when a person is admitted to hospice, the expectation, so to speak, is that the person will transition within 6 months. However, that's not always the case. I've had people in hospice for 2 years. So they're always checking the person every 6 months to bring them back on for an additional 6 months, but generally that's where it starts. So in that 6 months, Eileen, and I'll go back to my own personal experience with my mom and my father, that the first 6 months, let's say the first 3 months, you really see that they start to withdraw. And I don't necessarily mean depression. Some people are, some people aren't, but they start to withdraw really from society, from social engagements, and from family being around them. Their appetite isn't great. They're not really into food. They'll eat to eat, but they're not eating what they would once eat when they were healthy. The communication is minimal in the sense that it's possibly an effort for them to talk and engage, and that's okay. So in essence, they become very quiet and they start to digress inwards, although they still can be social. So that's the first couple of months, and then as it progresses further down the road, you see that they're really not interested, Eileen, in eating at all, and they're not interested in talking, and their sleep becomes more and more where there's no balance, where you have 8 hours of awake and 12 hours of asleep. It's actually nearly the reverse. A lot of nodding off in the chair, maybe talking in the middle of conversation and they nod off, so their body becomes very tired and they just want to sleep.
And it's more than the medication.
Yes.
It's part of them preparing.
Yes.
As you say, they're drawing in and getting ready to release.
Yes. So they become very quiet and withdrawn. And this is, you know, again, I go back to the whole journey. It doesn't have to be a sad time. This is a beautiful time for family members that maybe are out of town to come in and visit and really have that quality time, because there's a great peace I find, with the person that's in hospice. There's a great acknowledgement of, I know what's going on here, and they're very open to conversations. And you too, as the family member, should be open to have those nice conversations with them.
While our transitioning family member is still responsive
Yes.
and can still speak with
Yes.
us. And you also love Barbara Kern's The 11th Hour, which is more than just what to look for, but it's a guide, a how-to, and it directs the family member who takes over. And we know there's always that family member who's the front runner, who'll be the one who'll take charge. Not only what to do with their loved one and the family, but just some suggestions. And one of them, of course, is how to use that time, set the atmosphere. Some of the things to do with the family, like collecting stories, writing down those stories, viewers. You know, that's always one of my priorities. Maybe putting pictures together, comforting each other, and creating this memory of their loved one.
And when I talk to you about that quiet time, it is such a special time, and I'll go back to my own personal experience. I heard stories that my father told me when he was dying that I never heard when he was living, if that makes sense. Because there was a resignation, and he was preparing, knowing that he was in hospice, and wanted to tell us the things that he probably, as a very busy father, didn't have time to tell us. So those beautiful stories came out during that time that people don't like, the hospice time. But it was very special. Because the stage was set.
Yeah, and also a time maybe to ask for forgiveness, make amends. Maybe if there was, he spent a lot of time working, that he wasn't able to be there, this is the time to have those conversations, because everything else has fallen away except love.
And everybody wants to resolve everything for peace and calmness and quietness, and to just acknowledge what's going to take place.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things that Barbara mentions is a particular facial grimace that is often present when we're down now to maybe minutes, less than an hour. And she recommends that this is a good time maybe for family members to say another goodbye, maybe each to take an alone goodbye. And one of the things that Barbara indicates in this book that we love, The 11th Hour, is a lovely meditation on how to help your loved one cross over. What were your thoughts in the meditation?
Well, it's interesting. When I read this book the other night, as I shared with you, I was very emotional because obviously my mom has passed for years, but looking back, everything she said is exactly how it unfolded with my family. So, you know, setting the stage, in my opinion, is so important because silence can be a killer too. And when you have lots of family members around the bed, and people are uneasy or haven't said what they needed to say or ask for forgiveness or still have family issues, when you put nice music in the background or some nice smelling oils, the windows open, you have fresh air coming in, it really does set the tone of tranquility, and it puts everybody in that place where they are calmer, because people are quite stressed. As you said, they're dumbfounded because they don't know what to say, and they don't know what not to say. And in the book, she mentions, as we talked earlier, about a Duda, which is a point of contact. Somebody has to be the leader. And you're always going to have that, because so many emotions come up. There should be no room for hysterics in the room, but crying naturally, reminiscing, asking for forgiveness, all of those things should be recognized. And if it's a big family, it's important for this person to be in the room, because she or he may need to say, well, let's give Tom, we'll say, for example, some time with his mom, and, you know, encourage everybody to step out of the room so that they each have their own special time, because the stage has to be set, right? And I loved when I read that book and she said that, because families, again, don't know what they don't know, and it is so important to have that person in place, that person of, I won't say sanity, but the guiding force that can join all the dots together and lead the family through this and let them, you know, have their emotions displayed very rawly with their parent.
And go through these final moments, stroke their hand. Barbara Kearns talks about maybe even envision a journey, a garden path, a little gate at the end, you're walking through it. We understand you have to go. It's not that it's okay. We're
Right.
going to miss you and we love
Right.
you, but we understand. Because Barbara Kearns indicates that there is a small degree of control as to the time the spirit finally leaves the body. They'll say a very protective parent will wait till their child has
I
left
agree
the room.
with that, yes.
Because they're afraid,
Yes.
they want to protect the child. So at this time, everyone's focus should be on their transitioning family
Yes.
member. Give them permission to leave and make it as peaceful for them as possible. If they're spiritual, if they're religion, absolutely talk about loved ones and God. If they're not, we don't impose a God upon them,
Right.
but we tell them that there's peace and that there's light and that there's joy waiting
Yes,
for
and that
them.
it's okay for them to go, that everything is going to be okay, and that each child, whether they're a grown man or a grown woman, should be able to tell their parent, we're going to be okay. It's okay for you to go.
Yes.
Body
yes.
needs to hear that too.
Because I'm sure, Aisling, and this is where these wonderful caregivers like yourself and the hospice nurse have to help the family deal not just with their raw grief, but with their guilt. Because if we tell mom it's okay to go, are we somehow saying that we don't love her as much? So we have to be coached in the language and the permission
Yes.
for us to let them go, as well as for them to leave.
I think you have to be very sensible when it comes to that, because I whispered in my own mother's ear as well to say, Mom, it's okay, you can let go. That was the hardest thing I had to say, because I didn't want her to go. But it wasn't about me. It was about my mom. And it was about that, you know, she really wasn't living. She was existing, and there's a big difference. And sadly, you know, the lack of hospice education with families is that sometimes it becomes about them and not the person that's dying, where they need to let that person go because there's no help for them anymore. And that's a transition as well. That's a hard one for families.
Yes, and indeed that's where our living will and end of life instructions. Often we've been given very specific in the legal documents instructions for how that person wanted their end of life care to be treated, and the family members, and often I find it's the family members who maybe were a little further away, didn't have the hands-on experience with the loved one, and are now reluctant to let them go, possibly from guilt, possibly trying to make up from lost time. But the kindest thing we can all do at that time is focus on our loved one. We can grieve when we've let them go.
Yes, so important.
And how about after death? How about immediately in the moments? Who should we contact? Who should be in the room? Any guidance for that, Aisling?
It depends who's around. I mean, you know, when you know the signs to look for, and if you do have a doula, and you don't have to have a doula, it can be, you know, the eldest in the family can be that person. But obviously, if the family is around the house in different rooms, ask them to come back into the room, because you know that the end is very, very close. And it's a very quiet, peaceful transition. It's a beautiful thing if the family can be around the bed, holding hands, maybe in prayer if they're that way so inclined. When that moment comes, it is a shock. Even though you've been preparing for months, you knew it was going to end. It's still a shock, because it's not something you're taught how to deal with. So I think straight after the person passes away, just maintaining composure, letting those emotions out, being a support for each other that's around the bed, and giving the body time to really just lay and be peaceful, whether that's an hour or 2 hours. In Ireland, as you know, we do it slightly different to here, and we let the body rest for several hours before the body is even touched. That's a beautiful thing, and people have that choice if they want to do that. Then the lead person, the connector, the doula, does need to then go ahead and start contacting the family members that are not around. And if the hospice nurse is not present, obviously to call the hospice and have them come in, pronounce the person having passed, and then sadly, as the day unfolds and the hours, putting those arrangements in place with the members of the family that are involved. So to initiate that process.
Yes, absolutely. In the funeral home, if a funeral home is going to be involved. And what Barbara says is, you know, try even to make that as gentle as possible. And now we're really thinking about the family members, you know, redress the bed, put maybe a little memento on the pillow, don't have the harsh overlight headlights on, because it can be very difficult for the family members who've been by the bedside to walk in. There's a splayed, unmade bed, harsh lights on, and their family member gone.
So again, back to setting the stage.
Yes,
setting the
and the
stage.
atmosphere.
And sadly, some of the people that maybe didn't make it in are going to come in at the end. So it's beautiful for them to see their mum or their dad, you know, fresh looking, slightly elevated in the bed, the room smelling fresh, maybe some flowers and the music still playing.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
If
if
you
we
can
can
put
make
that together.
if we can make this as a beautiful experience rather than a very, very stressed one for everyone involved. We can't take away the grief or the sadness, but we can take away some of the fear and stress.
And that's something too, Eileen, that people don't know either. And this is even families who have gone through the hospice experience. Hospice just doesn't finish right there and then. All of the hospice companies that take care of people have counsellors available for an entire year, and grief counselling to the family members. And families, I don't think, realise that, because we all know after everything is done and the body is put to rest and families all go back to where they go back to, then it really hits home, because you're in the quietness of your own home and you realise, my mom's not here anymore.
So I think Aisling has just come up with our next show, helping the family deal with the aftermath and maybe with the grief. Thank you so much, Aisling, for sharing. Viewers, I'm going to share with you the little poem that the title of Barbara's little booklet comes from, and it's by a poet, Van Dyck. And here's just a little piece of it. I am standing at the seashore. A ship spreads her white sails and starts for the blue ocean. She is an object of beauty and strength. I stand and watch until she is just a speck where the sea and sky meet. Then someone says, she is gone. Gone where? Gone from my sight. That is all. She is just as large in mast and hull as when she left my side. Her diminished size is in me, not her. Thank you, viewers, for watching. If you have a subject you'd like to see us cover on the show, by all means reach out to us if you have a story to share. Meanwhile, if you want to know about Aisling Companion Home Care, you can go to her website. Her information is on the screen. You can always find me and my resources at Curlin Walsh Law, or you could go to our spanking new website for the show, wheretheroadrises.com, where we have everything, all our previous shows, our resources, guests, and supplies for you. So you can always visit us there. Until next time, thank you.